Hi guys, what are we gonna do today? Today I'm using one of the new Roycycled 2022 Christmas papers. And if you guys know me at all, you would know this sheep is my favorite guy. We're using him in a little different way, but I think my lamb needs a crown. So, for Christmas. So this is what we're gonna make today, and then you can find any crown. Oh, we have another video that we did crowns in that you could put on your sheep. Let's get started. So this is the paper I am using. I just absolutely love this with the sheep on it. And I'm going to use this section right here. So the first thing I'm gonna do is just kind of cut down the middle of this and put the two baby sheeps aside. Put this one aside. I've gotten a piece, it's not quite as heavy as a thick canvas, but it's thicker than a cotton. I wanted something just a little sturdier. And I'm using white so that this will shine through very, very nicely. And I'm going to decoupage this piece of paper onto the top of this fabric. And you can use your favorite decoupage medium. I like this one that I've kind of been making, and it's just a mixture of a gel and a Mod Podge, and it's a little bit thicker than Mod Podge, but not quite as tacky as just a gel. And you can decide if you want to put it on the paper or the fabric. I'm gonna do a quick layer on this fabric. I think I'm gonna do a light mist of water on this, because this is going to want to soak up, and this will help it a little bit when I'm laying my decoupage medium down. And it'll glide a little better instead of just sticking to it. So I'm just doing a section at a time and very carefully laying it down. Pull this back. And it really does help if you lightly spray your fabric. Then your medium seems to glide over it much, much easier. And because this fabric's so thick, it really seems to hold really, really nicely. So you want to pull your paper back to where you've glued. You want to make sure you don't miss anything there. Otherwise you'll have an air bubble in there and it's not going to want to adhere. Careful you don't rip your paper, and this would be a good time to take a plastic bag and make sure you've rubbed all your bubbles out. So now I'm going to cover the top of this also with decoupage medium to seal the whole outside of the piece too, and to make it more durable. And after we've done this, we're just going to set it aside and let it dry really, really well. So you can decide the type of sealer and what you would like to use. You can use whatever decoupage medium and sealer that you prefer using. I don't think there is a real difference because it should be able to stick to the fabric fairly easily. But the big trick with the fabric is just doing a light spray of water over your fabric before you put your medium down. Okay, we're just gonna let this dry. So after your sheep is dry, what I'm gonna do is I'm taking this piece of fabric that's gonna be on the back. This is probably about the same weight as the top, not quite a canvas, but heavier than just a plain cotton. And I'm using a darker fabric for the back. I wanna trace around the sheep where I'm going to sew him. So I kind of have an idea of what I wanna do. I know I am gonna go a little bumpity around here, come out to the ear, probably coming out about a 1/2 inch. From there, I'm just giving myself a guideline. I want him to be kind of big here because by the time we get done, we're going to do a box bottom. So you can kind of see where I'm cutting as I cut this. I'm just cutting through the white fabric right now. And I'm giving myself a bit of a seam allowance, about a 1/2 inch, I would say. I want it to be just a little bigger. And then around here, I'm just going to go like this. I want it to be not perfectly straight, I want it to have some waves in it. I really wanted these two sides to be nice and big and rounded. And then I kind of come down a little bit and taper in down where these lines are. And this doesn't have to be exact. It's kind of like how you would like to do it. I can see there's a little paper here, so I'm just going to trim this excess paper off real quick. So this is what we have so far. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take the right side of this, which is the front, and if your fabric has a right and a front and a back side, you want it facing towards the front side of the fabric also. So the right sides will be facing together while you sew this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew all the way around, giving myself about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Even though I did a 1/2 inch, by the time you turn it inside out, it'll look just perfect because this is kind of stiff fabric. So we are going to use your sewing machine and sew all the way around this. And you could trim this down too. I'm just not going to until I get done. So we are going to sew all the way around it. When we're done sewing around it, we are going to make a slit through just this one layer of fabric on the back. And I'll show you that when we get to that part. So I've stitched around this and then I stitched it twice. This is really, really heavy. You don't need to, but I'm using a little smaller stitch. I may have gone off a little bit in here, but I wanted to do a double stitch just to secure it tightly. Now I am going to cut this back piece of fabric out and make some little slits without cutting my threads at some of the curves, so when we turn it inside out, it comes out nicely. We're just making the little slits and clips around. Do not cut through your threads. So you just do this all the way around, and then you'll get a pretty nice smooth look when you turn it inside out. Right here you probably really don't, and then at the straight edge. It's mostly anywhere you have a curve or a point where you want to clip. What I'm going to do very carefully is you want to separate the back from the front. And I know I have it separated. And I just want to start just a bit. I'm using my seam ripper, but you can use whatever you would like to get it started. And then I'll use my scissors to make a slit. And I'm going to make a fairly large slit in him because I want him to turn inside out very easily without messing up any of the paper. So what we are going to do next is we are going to make a flat box bottom so he stands nicely. So how we do this is these two corners right here, so the bottom corner here and the bottom corner here. You are going to open those corners up, careful with the paper on this. You want this seam, this bottom seam, and this side seam to lay on top of each other, like that. So now you have a triangle. From about the point here, you're gonna measure down about 2 inches. So right here. We're gonna do this with both sides. And I am just gonna draw this line. I don't know how well I'll see it on this side. Try to draw a line. Or at least fairly close so I can see where this is. I'm gonna do the same with the other side, and then I'm gonna sew straight across this, and on this side we'll do the same thing. The two seams, have them laying on top of each other. Just as long as you measure down about the same amount on both sides. You don't want to take too much off, but you want I want it to be nice and flat. So I'm going to sew this seam, and I'm going to sew this seam. So after you've sewn these 2 box bottoms, we're going to trim these. And actually, you don't even have to trim them. You could just have them laying folded in at the bottom. I'm just going to trim them slightly. What we're going to do next is you're going to carefully turn this right side out. Now that you have a nice big slit, it should work much easier. If you had a tiny hole, I'd really be concerned about ripping all the paper. I'm gonna just push it through carefully. And since these fabrics are a tad bit stiffer, it's kind of protecting this paper also. And then I'm just carefully gonna push all these little crevices out. You can use like a chopstick or some hemostats or whatever you would like to help push these out, but you just don't want to poke all the way through your fabric. Poke my little ear out carefully. You can see his ears are definitely more defined, and you can see some of the curves. My cricket friends are being friendly today. They're very excited about my lamb. Look at that. Isn't that already looking kind of cool? And then you can see when you push these corners out, how this is going to be a nice flat box bottom so he stands nicely. Look at that. Isn't that going to be really nice? So what I'm going to start doing is I'm just going to start stuffing him. I'm going to use some polyfill. I'm going to start stuffing up in here, down in the bottom. And then as we start getting full, I'll show you how I start stitching and then continue stuffing. So I am stuffing, and you can see he's getting fuller. He's not quite done yet. There's still some wrinkles in here. But what I found is when I get to this point, about like this, I'm going to take a needle with a very heavy thread. You can use button thread, and it's a real thick thread, or another thick type of thread that just doesn't snap when you pull it, because this is a heavy fabric and we're going to be pulling it tightly, just not the end. And what I'm going to do is a whip stitch about halfway up, and then that part will be closed, so then I can put more stuffing down inside. If you guys have never done a whip stitch, we have a stitching video that shows you some of these stitches, but you're really just going back and forth and grabbing one end and then the other and then pulling tightly. When I start sewing this up, I'll come back down and add more stuffing. So I'm about halfway here. What I'm going to do is do a couple stitches to lock this in place and leave the thread on here. I'm going to move this little thread out of the way. And I use these and they work well, but you can do however you would like, some chopsticks, something else. And you can see where some of these little bumps are down in here. We're going to fill those in. And it's a lot easier to stuff this more tightly after you've sewn some of the seam up. So you can see this box bottom is filling up nicely. And then even like here on these edges where you can see these little bumps. Start taking some of this and filling it in there and pushing it over. I'm trying to smooth out as much as I can. Not like all of it really matters, but then you're getting a very, very nice, tight fit. Let me show you on the front. See how the bottom is starting to fill in really, really nicely. You can see right here. I still have more to go. I'm just gonna stitch up some more, get a little closer to the top here, and then finish stuffing. Okay, so I think this is stuffed well enough. I am just going to finish stitching him shut, and then we're going to take some packing tape and defluff him. I'm just trying to get some of the lint off. Look at that, guys. Look at him. Okay. Okay, so I need to make another crown now to put on this guy right here. Now this one, we had antiqued afterward and then resealed. This one we just sealed and I didn't put any antiquing on it. So it depends on which look you like better. But I hope you enjoyed this project. I love these new papers, but whatever you do, have fun.